The night was calm and peaceful. The streets of Willow Creek were empty, covered in a soft silver light from the moon. It was the kind of night when people slept with their windows open and crickets sang in the grass. Inside a small brick house at the end of the lane, Marcus Hill was sitting by the kitchen table, drinking a cup of tea. Marcus was a retired Navy SEAL commander. He had served for 20 years and had seen war in more countries than he could count. But tonight, he wasn't a soldier. He was just a husband sitting quietly with his wife, Leah. She was kind, calm, and strong. The reason Marcus always said he had survived the storms of his life. Leah moved around the kitchen, humming softly while she cleaned up. She wore a simple blue robe and had her hair tied back. "You should sleep," she told him with a gentle smile. "You look tired," Marcus chuckled. "After all those missions, I still can't sleep before midnight," he said. His voice was deep but warm. Outside, the neighborhood was silent. A soft breeze brushed through the trees. The couple's dog, Jasper, lay near the back door, half asleep, occasionally twitching his ears when a sound came from the yard. Everything seemed normal, but sometimes normal nights hide strange turns of fate. At around 2 in the morning, Marcus noticed Jasper suddenly raise his head. The dog growled lowly, not loud, but sharp enough to get Marcus's attention. Leah paused, looking toward the window. "What is it?" she whispered. Marcus stood up and moved closer to the curtain. He peeked outside. There was movement near the street, the flash of light, maybe a reflection from a car. He frowned. "Probably a car turning around," he said quietly. But the light didn't move away. It stayed there, flickering softly. Leah walked closer, her eyes filled with curiosity. "Maybe someone's car broke down," she said. She reached for her phone on the counter. "Should I go check?" Marcus shook his head. "No, wait," he said in his calm military tone. "I'll take a look." But Leah smiled and said, "You worry too much. I'll just see from the porch." Before Marcus could stop her, she had already slipped on her slippers and moved toward the front door. Jasper followed, tail low, alert but quiet. Marcus felt uneasy, an old instinct from years of training. Something about the silence outside felt wrong. When Leah opened the door, cool night air filled the house. The world outside looked still, too still. The streetlights flickered faintly, and the sound of the wind through the trees was the only thing moving. Leah stepped out carefully, holding her phone with the flashlight on. The beam cut through the darkness like a thin white blade. From the corner of the street, someone's voice shouted, "Stop right there!" Leah froze. Her heart jumped. She turned, confused. "What?" she called out. Her voice echoed down the street. Marcus immediately rushed to the door. When he saw the flashing blue lights of police cars down the block, his stomach tightened. He stepped outside, hands raised, calling out, "Wait! She's not—" But his words were drowned out by the chaos that followed. The police had been chasing a suspect through the area. Someone reported to be armed. The officers were tense, their adrenaline high. They saw a figure holding something shiny under the porch light, and in the half-second that followed, fear took control. Marcus shouted again, louder this time. "She's holding a phone! That's my wife!" The next moment was a blur of noise, confusion, and disbelief. A sharp sound cracked through the quiet night. Jasper barked and ran toward Leah. The phone dropped to the ground, its light still shining across the porch steps. Marcus's breath froze. The world around him slowed down. He didn't hear the officers shouting anymore. All he heard was his heartbeat pounding in his ears. He rushed forward, his training forgotten, only one thought in his mind. Leah. She was on the ground, her hand trembling as she tried to move. Marcus knelt beside her, calling her name. "Leah! Look at me. You're going to be okay." His voice was calm, but his eyes were filled with fear. The officers finally realized something was wrong. They lowered their weapons and ran forward, one shouting for medical help. But Marcus didn't move. He held Leah's hand tightly, whispering, "Stay with me. You're strong, remember? You always are." The night that had started in peace was now filled with sirens, voices, and flashing lights. Neighbors came out in their pajamas, whispering in shock. Marcus looked up, his face pale under the blue lights. He wasn't angry yet, just numb. He couldn't understand how a simple night had turned into a nightmare. All he wanted was his wife safe. The ambulance arrived minutes later, but to Marcus, those minutes felt like hours. As they lifted Leah onto the stretcher, he followed beside her, still whispering calm words. Not as a soldier this time, but as a husband trying to hold on to hope. The quiet night of Willow Creek was no longer quiet. And for Marcus Hill, it was the beginning of a fight he never expected to face. Not on a battlefield, but in his own neighborhood. The sirens were still echoing when Marcus followed the ambulance to the hospital. The flashing red and blue lights made the streets glow like fire and ice. His hands were shaking as he drove, but his mind stayed focused. Years of Navy SEAL training had taught him how to stay calm in chaos. But nothing had prepared him for this kind of battle, a battle for his wife's life. At the hospital gate, he stopped his car and ran inside before anyone could stop him. The nurses rushed Leah to the emergency room. A doctor called out medical terms that Marcus didn't understand, only that they were fighting to keep her alive. He stood outside the glass door, breathing hard, watching through the window. His world had shrunk to that one small room. He didn't cry. He just stared, silent, lost between shock and disbelief. Leah's face looked pale under the bright lights, her hair tangled, her hands still trembling. She had always been the one who smiled even in hard times. Now she lay still. Marcus pressed his hand against the cold glass and whispered, "Stay strong, Leah. You always do." Minutes turned to hours. The police chief arrived, his uniform neat but his face heavy with guilt. 2 officers followed him, the same ones from the street. They looked nervous, their eyes down. "Commander Hill," the chief said quietly, recognizing Marcus from the service. We didn't know." It was a mistake. A terrible mistake. Marcus turned his head slowly. His calm voice returned, though it felt like stone. "A mistake?" he said softly. "You shot my wife because she had a phone in her hand. You didn't stop to think." The younger officer stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Sir, we got a call about an armed suspect in the area." It was dark and she had something shining. Marcus interrupted him. "You don't shoot first because it's dark," he said, his tone cold but controlled. "You confirm, you talk. You don't guess. You don't aim at someone's home." The chief swallowed hard. "I understand your anger, sir. We'll investigate everything. Body cameras, radio calls, every step." Marcus took a deep breath. "I'm not angry," he said. "Not yet. I just want her alive." The officers stepped back, silent. None of them could meet his eyes. Inside the emergency room, a nurse opened the door slightly and said, "Commander Hill, she's stable now. The doctor will speak to you soon." Marcus exhaled for the first time in hours. His shoulders dropped a little, but his eyes stayed sharp. He walked to the waiting chair and sat down. His mind replayed every second. The shout, the light, the sound, the silence. It all happened so fast, like a bad dream. He remembered Leah's smile only minutes before it happened, the way she laughed when he spilled tea on the counter. The warmth of that small moment felt far away now. After a while, a doctor came out wearing a tired expression. "She's alive," he said. "She lost some blood, but she's strong. She's asking for you." Marcus stood instantly. "Can I see her?" The doctor nodded. Only for a few minutes. He walked into the room quietly. Machines beeped softly around Leah. She opened her eyes slowly and smiled weakly when she saw him. "Marcus," she whispered, "what happened?" He sat beside her and took her hand. "There was confusion," he said softly. "They thought you were someone else." She blinked, her eyes filling with tears. "I was just checking outside," she said. "I saw lights. I thought someone needed help." "I know," Marcus whispered. "You did nothing wrong," Leah's voice trembled. "Did they say sorry?" Marcus looked down. "They will," he said. "But that's not enough." He stayed by her side until she fell asleep. Then he stood up and walked out of the room slowly. Outside, the hallway was quiet. The chief was still there, waiting. "Commander Hill," the chief began carefully. "I know words mean little right now, but we'll take full responsibility. The department will support your family." "Please!" Marcus raised a hand to stop him. No, he said firmly. I don't need support. I need change. I've trained men for combat my whole life. We teach them discipline, patience, awareness. If my team made a mistake like this, people would face consequences. The chief nodded slowly. I understand, sir. Marcus walked past him without another word. He stepped outside the hospital doors and looked at the sunrise breaking over the horizon. The sky was painted in soft orange and pink. A new day was starting, but it didn't feel peaceful. It felt heavy. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes. He wasn't thinking about revenge. He was thinking about truth. About how fear had replaced good judgment. About how someone's training could fail in 1 second of panic. That morning, reporters began gathering outside the hospital. Someone had already leaked the story, an officer's accidental shooting of an unarmed woman. But what caught everyone's attention was who her husband was, a decorated Navy SEAL commander. Marcus didn't speak to the media. He simply walked to his car, sat behind the wheel, and looked at Leah's phone lying on the passenger seat. Its screen was cracked but still glowing faintly. The same light that had caused the confusion now looked harmless, small, and silent. He stared at it for a long moment and whispered, "You thought it was a weapon." Then he shook his head. "You didn't see the human behind the light." As he drove home to feed Jasper and gather Leah's things, his mind grew clearer. He knew he couldn't change what happened that night, but he could make sure it would never happen again to anyone else. The confusion had started a storm, and Marcus Hill was ready to face it. Not as a soldier in battle, but as a man seeking justice, truth, and peace. The morning after the shooting, Willow Creek felt different. The town that had always been quiet now buzzed with whispers and questions. Police cars still stood on the street where the tragedy happened. Yellow tape fluttered in the breeze, marking the spot that had turned peaceful lives into chaos. Marcus Hill returned home after spending the night at the hospital. Leah was stable but still weak. The doctors said she needed rest, both for her body and her mind. Marcus promised her he would come back after feeding Jasper and gathering her clothes. When he entered their home, silence filled the air. The porch light was still on, and the phone that had caused all the confusion lay on the steps. He picked it up carefully, staring at it for a long moment. It was cracked, dirty, and cold. To him, it wasn't just a phone anymore. It was a symbol of how fear had replaced reason. Inside the house, everything looked frozen in time. 2 cups of tea sat half-finished on the kitchen table. The blanket Leah used on the couch was still there. Jasper came running to him, wagging his tail, unaware of what had happened. Marcus knelt down and hugged the dog tightly. "She's okay," he whispered. "She's going to be fine." He sat quietly for a while, looking around the home that now felt empty. His mind played the same moments again and again. The lights, the shouting, the sudden noise. Every time he blinked, he saw Leah's face in that flash of panic. Then came a knock on the door. When Marcus opened it, a crowd of reporters stood outside. Cameras flashed. Voices called his name. "Commander Hill, do you want to say something? How is your wife? Do you blame the police?" Marcus didn't answer at first. He just stood there, calm but unreadable. Then, with a steady voice, he said, "My wife is alive. That's all that matters right now." "Do you plan to take legal action?" one reporter asked. Marcus looked straight into the camera. "I plan to seek the truth," he said. "Not revenge, truth." The reporters fell silent for a moment. They weren't expecting that answer. Marcus closed the door gently and went back inside. He didn't want anger to control his words. He wanted clarity. Later that day, the police chief called again, asking to meet him privately. Marcus agreed. They met at the station in a small conference room. The chief looked tired and regretful. "Marcus, the department is under pressure," he said. "The footage is being reviewed. The public is demanding answers." Marcus nodded. "They should," he replied. The chief sighed. "The officers involved, they're broken too. They didn't mean for this to happen." Marcus leaned forward. His voice was quiet but firm. "Intentions don't erase results. I've led men in real combat. Mistakes there cost lives too. But we face them, we learn, we fix them. You need to do the same. The chief listened, guilt written across his face. You're right, he said softly. We failed. When Marcus left the station, the afternoon sun was setting. The sky glowed orange, casting long shadows across the town. He walked slowly, deep in thought. Every person he passed gave him a sympathetic look. Some even stopped to shake his hand, thanking him for his service and expressing sorrow for what had happened. At the hospital that evening, Leah was sitting up when he entered. Her face lit up when she saw him. You came back, she said with a small smile. I said I would, Marcus replied, sitting beside her. She reached for his hand. They told me people are talking about it, she said softly. The news, social media, everyone knows. Marcus nodded. They do, but we'll face it together. Leah looked down, her voice trembling. I don't want to be a story, Marcus. I just want peace. He squeezed her hand gently. I know, he said. But sometimes peace comes after truth. She stayed quiet, thinking. You're going to do something, aren't you? Marcus didn't answer right away. He looked out the window at the city lights. If I don't, this will happen again to someone else, he said finally. I can't let that happen. Later that night, after Leah fell asleep, Marcus stepped out of the hospital. He stood under the stars, the cool night wind brushing his face. He felt the same calm he used to feel before a mission. Not fear, not rage, just focus. He thought about the young officers. He remembered their trembling voices and scared faces. He could tell they hadn't been ready for real danger. They hadn't been trained to handle fear, only to react fast. That was the real enemy. Fear without understanding. Marcus decided that night that he wouldn't fight them with anger. He would fight the system that allowed fear to rule over judgment. The next morning, he made a call to an old friend, a former SEAL who now worked in training law enforcement officers. I need to start something, Marcus said over the phone. Something that changes how they respond, how they see people, how they think in the dark. His friend replied, You sound like a commander again. Marcus smiled faintly. Maybe it's time to lead again. As he hung up, the sun rose behind him, bright and golden. It felt like a quiet promise, that from pain could come purpose. That day marked the beginning of something new. The world had seen tragedy, but Marcus was about to show them something stronger, resilience, leadership, and hope. The aftermath was no longer just about sorrow. It was about rebuilding trust, one truth at a time. The sun had barely risen when the world around Marcus changed completely. News vans lined the street outside his home, and the story had spread far beyond Willow Creek. Every channel carried the same headline. Police mistake nearly takes life of Navy SEAL commander's wife. Reporters stood behind fences, whispering into cameras, repeating the same line again and again. They called it a tragedy, a failure, a wake-up call. But to Marcus, it wasn't a headline. It was his life. Inside his house, Marcus sat at the table where he and Leah once shared tea. Now, folders, notes, and documents covered the wooden surface. He had spent the night reading, writing, and planning. His hands were steady, his eyes sharp. The soldier in him had returned, but not for war. This time he was fighting for truth. A knock came at the door. Marcus opened it to find a woman in a gray suit holding a badge. Commander Hill, she said politely, I'm Special Investigator Dana Clark. I've been assigned to lead the internal review. May I come in? Marcus nodded. Please. She stepped inside and looked around quietly. I want to begin by saying I'm sorry, she said. I've reviewed the initial report. There are gaps, a lot of them. Marcus folded his arms. I've read it too, he said. The report says the officers believed they saw a weapon. But no one mentions the flashlight on her phone. No one mentions the warning, I shouted. Dana nodded. That's exactly why I'm here. We'll go through everything. Body camera footage, radio logs, training history. Nothing will be hidden. Marcus watched her carefully. She spoke with the calm of someone who wanted to help. For the first time, he felt a small spark of hope. They sat down together as she opened her laptop. The first video played, grainy body cam footage from the night of the shooting. The screen showed flashing lights, shouts, confusion. Then, Leah appeared, standing under the porch light, her phone glowing in her hand. The voice of one officer came through, "Put it down!" But before she could reply, another voice shouted, "Weapon!" And then the sound that still echoed in Marcus's nightmares. He looked away, his jaw tight. Dana paused the video. "Commander Hill," she said softly, "you can step outside if you want." "No," Marcus said. "I've faced worse. I need to see this." The rest of the footage revealed what Marcus already knew. Fear had taken control. There was no clear sight of a weapon, no time for communication, just panic. When the video ended, Dana leaned back. "This wasn't about bad intent," she said quietly. "It was about poor training and uncontrolled fear." "You were right," Marcus nodded slowly. "Fear makes people blind. I've seen it on the battlefield, but this is supposed to be home." Dana closed her laptop. "The department will face questions, Commander. There will be hearings. But I think your voice, your experience, can help turn this into something meaningful." That night, Marcus went back to the hospital. Leah was awake, her strength slowly returning. She smiled faintly when she saw him. "You've been working again, haven't you?" she teased softly. He chuckled. "You know me too well." "What are you planning?" she asked. "I'm helping with the investigation," he said. "They're going to review everything. I want to make sure they understand what really went wrong, not just that it was a mistake, but why." Leah nodded. "You always turn pain into purpose," she whispered. "That's why I married you." Her words gave him strength. He spent the next few days working closely with Dana. They reviewed call transcripts, timing records, and officer statements. Slowly, a clear picture began to form. The officers had responded to a 911 call about a tall man with a weapon. But the caller's description didn't match Leah at all, not her size, not her clothing. Somewhere in the rush of the night, information had been mixed up. Dana frowned as she read the notes. "This report was written in a hurry," she said. "And parts of the radio log are missing." Marcus's expression hardened. "Missing? Maybe accidentally," Dana said carefully, "but we'll find out." A few days later, a public meeting was held at the town hall. Citizens, journalists, and police officers filled the room. Marcus stood quietly in the back at first, listening as people argued. Some blamed the officers. Some blamed the system. Some said nothing could be done. Then someone called out, "Commander Hill!" "What do you think?" The room fell silent. All eyes turned toward him. Marcus slowly walked to the front. He wasn't wearing his medals or his uniform. He stood there in a plain shirt, calm and steady. "I think fear is the problem," he said. "And fear comes from not knowing the people you protect, not knowing how to stay calm when the world gets dark. I've seen fear destroy soldiers in war. Now I've seen it destroy peace in our streets. We can't keep pretending this is normal." People nodded, quiet and thoughtful. He continued, "I don't want anyone fired. I want them trained. I want them to see what happens when they act before they think. My wife could have died because of panic. No more of that." "Not here." When he finished speaking, the room was silent for a moment, then filled with soft applause. Even some officers in the crowd lowered their heads in respect. After the meeting, Dana approached him. "You just changed the conversation," she said. "People are listening now." Marcus looked out the window at the town lights glowing in the night. "Good," he said quietly. "Then let's make sure this never happens again." That night, as he returned to the hospital, Leah was watching the news. The anchor was talking about his speech. She smiled when she saw him walk in. "You did it, didn't you?" she said softly. Marcus smiled back. "It's just the beginning," and indeed it was. The investigation had opened doors, not just to truth, but to change. What started as tragedy was slowly turning into something greater, a movement for understanding, empathy, and better training, all led by a man who had already faced the darkest nights and still believed in light. The town of Willow Creek had changed in just a few weeks. The quiet streets that once held nothing but peace now carried a heavy silence of reflection. Posters that once read "Support our police" now had new ones beside them. Justice for Leah. People weren't angry anymore. They were curious. They wanted answers. Marcus Hill stood by Leah's hospital bed as the morning sun filtered through the window. Her face looked stronger now, color returning to her cheeks. She was reading news updates on her tablet. The headlines were everywhere. Commander Hill demands reform. Police fear training under review. And Leah Hill speaks for the first time. Leah looked up and said softly, "It's strange, Marcus. I never thought our names would be in the news." Marcus gave a faint smile. "Neither did I. But sometimes life puts you in a storm you never asked for." That morning, investigator Dana Clark arrived with a thick folder in her hands. Her face was serious but focused. "Commander Hill," she said, "we found something." Marcus stood up immediately. "What is it?" Dana opened the folder and placed a few printed photos on the table, still frames from the officers' body cameras taken seconds before the incident. "Look closely," she said. In the image, Leah could be seen holding her phone, the flashlight glowing bright white. But something else was clear now. The officer who fired didn't have a clear view. His line of sight was blocked by a tree, and the light he saw wasn't directly in front of him. Marcus leaned forward. "So he didn't even see her properly?" Dana nodded. "No, he reacted to another officer's shout, the one who said, 'Weapon.' But here's where it gets worse." She flipped another page. The officer who shouted "weapon" later admitted in his report that he never saw one. He panicked after hearing another sound, a metallic noise from a car nearby. Marcus's eyes darkened slightly. "So, one mistake caused another," Dana sighed. "Yes, a chain of fear. No one stopped to verify. No one communicated clearly. It was like a domino effect, and your wife was the last piece to fall." Leah's hands trembled as she listened. "All that because someone got scared?" Dana nodded. "I'm afraid so." For a moment, no one spoke. The truth felt heavy in the room. But Marcus wasn't surprised. He had expected something like this. He had seen fear cause similar errors in combat zones, but never in his own home country. He stood tall and said quietly, "Then let's bring this truth to light." The next day, Dana and Marcus appeared together at a press conference. Reporters packed the hall, cameras flashing non-stop. The entire country was watching. When Marcus took the podium, he didn't shout or accuse. His voice was calm, steady, and full of quiet strength. "My wife, Leah, almost lost her life because of a chain of fear," he began. "Not hate, fear. Fear made people see danger where there was none. Fear made them react before thinking. I've seen fear destroy soldiers in war, but this time it destroyed peace in our own town." The room fell completely silent. Reporters didn't interrupt. Marcus continued, "The truth is out now. The body cams show the confusion, the panic, and the lack of communication. I'm not here to ruin careers. I'm here to rebuild trust. If we keep ignoring the truth, then this will happen again. To someone else's wife, someone else's husband, someone else's child." Then he paused and looked straight into the cameras. "We can do better. We must do better. For Leah and for everyone who deserves to feel safe." When he finished, there was silence. Then a slow wave of applause. Even officers standing in the back lowered their heads, ashamed but thoughtful. The next morning, news stations across the country replayed his speech. It spread fast. People shared his words on social media, calling him the calm commander. Schools invited him to speak about courage and emotional control. Police departments from other states reached out, asking him to advise their training programs. Leah watched all this from her hospital bed. She smiled faintly as she scrolled through the messages. One comment caught her attention. "He taught us that real strength isn't in pulling the trigger. It's in knowing when not to." When Marcus came to visit later that day, she showed him the message. "You're changing people's hearts, Marcus," she said softly. He sat beside her, his expression thoughtful. "If we can turn pain into learning, then maybe it's worth it," he said. That evening, Dana called with another update. "The investigation is officially complete," she said. "The report concludes it was a failure of communication and training. The officers will face suspension, and new training will be introduced across the county. Marcus nodded. That's a start, he said. Dana smiled slightly. You know, Commander, most people would have screamed for punishment. But you chose education. That's rare, Marcus replied. Punishment ends something. Education changes it. When he hung up, he walked to the hospital garden where Leah often sat during the day. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of flowers. He sat beside her quietly. Leah looked at him and said, So, it's over? Marcus shook his head gently. No, the investigation is over, but the mission is just beginning. She smiled softly, understanding what he meant. You're going to train them, aren't you? He looked up at the sky, painted in shades of pink and gold by the setting sun. If we can teach fear to pause before it reacts, he said, then we'll save more lives than any gun ever could. Leah reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. Then let's make it happen. As the day ended, Marcus felt something new. Not anger, not pain, but purpose. The truth had come out, and it had set a new path before them, a path toward healing, understanding, and change. And though the scars of that night would never fully fade, they would become something greater, proof that even the darkest moments can light the way for others. Weeks had passed since the truth came out. The investigation was over, but for Marcus and Leah Hill, the real work was only beginning. Leah was back home now. Her movements were slow, but her spirit was bright. The house that once felt cold and silent was again filled with the smell of tea, the sound of soft music, and Jasper's tail thumping on the floor. Life was returning, gently, step by step. One afternoon, Leah sat on the porch with a notebook in her lap. You know, she said with a smile, everyone keeps sending letters. People from other towns, even from other countries. Marcus looked up from the newspaper. What do they say? She turned a few pages and read aloud. They say your words changed how they see things. One police officer wrote that he started training his team to speak before they draw. Marcus smiled faintly. Then maybe something good came from it. Leah nodded. But we can do more. That sentence stayed in Marcus's mind for the rest of the day. He had spent his whole life training soldiers to stay calm in danger. Maybe now he could train peace officers to stay calm in fear. That evening, he sat down at the same kitchen table where everything had started and opened his laptop. On a blank page, he typed 3 words. Leah's Light Project. The idea was simple: to teach officers how to think clearly in stressful moments, to use empathy, and to handle fear before it turned into panic. It wouldn't be a protest or a punishment. It would be education through understanding. The next morning, Marcus shared the idea with Leah. She listened quietly and then said, It's perfect. If fear started this, light should end it. They began making calls. Old friends from the Navy, training experts, psychologists, and community leaders joined the plan. Some offered funding. Others offered space and support. News of the project spread quickly. Soon, messages from police departments and safety groups started arriving. Can we join? Can you teach us? But not everyone approved. A few people still doubted the project. Some said it was too soft. Others said Marcus was trying to fix something too big to change. Marcus only smiled and replied, Change starts small. One heart, one mind. A few weeks later, they held the first class in a small training hall near Willow Creek. 20 young officers sat in a circle. On the wall behind Marcus was a single banner that read, Leah's Light, Courage Without Fear. Leah sat quietly in the back, watching. Marcus began, You've all faced danger, but fear isn't your enemy. Fear keeps you alive until it controls you. When it controls you, you stop seeing clearly, and that's when mistakes happen. He told them about that night, not in anger, but as a lesson. You don't need to be perfect, he said softly. You just need to breathe, think, and remember that the person in front of you is human, just like you. The room was silent. Many officers lowered their heads. One young woman whispered, Sir, I never thought about it like that. Leah smiled through tears. After the session, a reporter approached Marcus outside. Commander, why are you doing this? She asked. Marcus looked at the sunset and replied, "Because peace is worth training for, too." Within months, Leah's light became known across the state. Other towns invited Marcus and Leah to speak. News channels shared clips of their sessions. People began to call them the couple who taught calm. During one event, Leah took the stage for the first time. Her voice was gentle but powerful. "I don't remember that night clearly," she said, "but I remember the fear. And I remember my husband's voice telling me to hold on. That same calm saved me, and it can save others too. Fear doesn't end with violence. It ends with understanding." The crowd stood and applauded. Cameras flashed, but Leah didn't look for fame. She just looked at Marcus, who was smiling proudly from the side of the stage. That night, as they drove home, Leah looked out the window at the city lights. "Do you think it's working?" she asked. Marcus kept his eyes on the road and smiled. "Yes, maybe not everywhere yet, but it's spreading, like light through darkness." He reached over and held her hand. "You're stronger than you know, Leah. You turned your pain into a lesson for the world." She squeezed his hand softly. "We did it together." Months later, the governor invited them to speak at a state ceremony. They walked on stage, hand in hand, to a standing ovation. Behind them, a large screen showed the words, "Leah's Light Initiative, now a national program." Marcus spoke to the audience of officers, students, and leaders. Courage isn't found in shouting louder or acting faster. Courage lives in patience, in listening, and in choosing to think before you act. That's what Leah taught me. Leah smiled beside him, tears in her eyes. That night, after the event, they returned home and sat quietly on the porch. The same porch where fear had once changed their lives. Now it was peaceful again. Fireflies glowed in the yard, and Jasper lay at their feet. Leah leaned her head on Marcus's shoulder. "We came full circle," she whispered. Marcus nodded slowly. "Yes, we turned darkness into light." Above them, the stars shone brightly, silent witnesses to a story that began with pain and ended with purpose. The fight for justice had never been about revenge. It had always been about peace, the kind that lives inside brave hearts who choose to heal instead of hate. Years passed, but people still remembered the night that changed Willow Creek, the night when fear almost took a life and courage turned it into hope. What began as tragedy had grown into something much greater, a movement that reached far beyond one small town. The Leah's Light Foundation had now trained thousands of officers, soldiers, and community workers across the country. Its message was simple: stay calm, see clearly, act with compassion. Across schools and academies, banners carried its slogan, "Courage without fear." Marcus Hill walked slowly across the training field one bright morning, watching a new group of recruits practice. They weren't learning combat tactics. They were learning to listen, to pause before reacting, to communicate before assuming. Each lesson began with Leah's voice, recorded from one of her speeches. "Fear is fast. Wisdom is slow. Choose wisdom." The recruits stood quietly, their faces serious, some emotional. Many of them hadn't been alive when the incident happened, but they all knew the story. The night when a phone light was mistaken for a weapon, and how one couple turned pain into peace. Leah sat under a nearby tree, wrapped in a light shawl, watching with gentle eyes. Though her health had grown fragile, her spirit was still strong. When one young officer walked up to her after training, he said softly, "Ma'am, your words changed the way I see people." "Thank you." Leah smiled warmly. "Just keep seeing the person, not the threat," she said. "That's all I ever wanted." Later that day, Marcus joined her under the tree. The wind moved softly through the leaves. He handed her a cup of tea. "They're good," he said. "Better than I was at their age," Leah laughed softly. "Because they're learning peace before they learn war," he nodded. "Exactly." That evening, they attended a ceremony at the state capitol. The governor stepped on stage and called them forward. Behind them, a huge screen displayed the faces of hundreds of graduates from the Leah's Light program, people of every color, age, and uniform. The governor spoke with pride. "Years ago, a tragedy tested this community. But instead of anger, one man and one woman chose understanding. Today, Leah's Light is not just a program. It's a legacy. The crowd stood in applause. Marcus helped Leah to the podium. She looked at the sea of faces, officers, students, families, and reporters, and spoke softly but clearly. When something breaks, you have two choices. You can throw it away or you can fix it. We chose to fix it, not with anger but with hope. Because the light that guides us isn't just in the sky. It's inside every person who decides to do good, even after being hurt. Tears filled many eyes in the audience. Even the officers who once wore guilt now clapped proudly, knowing they were part of something healing. After the event, a young reporter approached Marcus and asked, "Commander Hill, do you ever wish that night never happened?" Marcus paused. His face was calm, thoughtful. "Every day," he said. "But if it hadn't happened, the world might still be blind to fear. Sometimes, change needs pain to begin." The reporter nodded, speechless. Months later, Leah's Light expanded internationally. Countries across the world requested the training model. Schools started peace education versions for teenagers. In small villages and large cities alike, people spoke about empathy, calmness, and the courage to pause before reacting. Leah's name became a symbol of strength. People began to say, "Be the light," like Leah. Years rolled by, and life grew quiet for the Hills. They spent their evenings on the same porch where everything had once gone wrong. Now the night air was peaceful again. Fireflies blinked around the yard, and Jasper's old collar hung by the door, a memory of faithful days. One evening, Leah leaned back in her chair, her eyes soft and distant. "Marcus," she whispered, "do you think people will still remember us when we're gone?" Marcus looked at her and smiled gently. "They won't need to remember us," he said. "They'll remember what we stood for." She smiled faintly. "Then that's enough." The sun dipped low, painting the sky with shades of gold and lavender. Marcus took her hand in his, a quiet promise that even when the world forgot their names, their light would keep shining. Years later, after Leah passed peacefully in her sleep, people across the world lit candles in her honor. News stations played clips of her speeches, schools held moments of silence, and officers wore white ribbons marked with her name. At her memorial, Marcus stood before a crowd that filled the park. The same park where Leah once taught children to plant trees during the early days of the foundation. He looked over the faces, young officers, teachers, families, and strangers who had been touched by her story. In his speech, he said softly, "Leah never wanted fame. She wanted peace, and she gave it, not through words of anger, but through light that never fades." Then he smiled, looking at the sky. "Her light lives in all of you. Every time you pause to think before you act, every time you choose kindness instead of fear, that's her legacy." The crowd stood in silence, the glow of candles reflecting in their eyes. When the ceremony ended, Marcus walked alone to the small garden behind their home. The same tree where Leah once sat watching the trainees was now covered with tiny lanterns. On its trunk, a small plaque read, "Leah's Light, a lesson the world will never forget." Marcus stood there for a long time. The wind brushed against his face, warm and soft. He felt peace, not sorrow, because he knew the mission they started together would live far beyond their time. As he looked up, the stars seemed brighter that night, like 1,000 quiet reminders that even after darkness, light always returns. And in that silence, one truth remained clear. Courage, love, and compassion are stronger than fear. That was Leah's gift to the world. That was her legacy.